Hey everyone, and welcome back to Salt Bake Mini. I'll be switching gears this week. I got a little excited and started working on creating one of the cooking vessels I'll be using. Today, I'll be making a casserole dish. I don't know about you, but when I was a child, I'm pretty sure my mom used her casserole dish as a way to torture me. Chicken casserole, tuna casserole, lasagna, I hated them all. When I saw that dish come out of the cupboard, I knew I was in for a fun time at the dinner table. Now that I'm an adult, my mom doesn't force me to eat casseroles anymore. No, that seems to be my wife's job now. The first thing I need is an actual casserole dish. I used a full-size one for reference and scaled everything down during the design phase. Then 3D printed it. In order to turn the 3D print into a ceramic version, I'm going to make a plaster mold of it and then slip cast the clay into the mold. I use an empty cereal box for the base. It's easy to use and works well for the size of mold I'll be making. I start by tracing around the outline of the print so I can get the sizing just right. I can then mark the size of the mold and cut it out. Because I'll be bending the cereal box, I score the line so I get a nice straight bend. I'm using aluminum tape as a moisture barrier. If I just poured the plaster into the box would absorb the water of the plaster and fall apart. Aluminum tape is placed on all the sides, and then the sides are bent in to create the mold box. I can now use the same tape to seal in my print and tape the sides so no plaster escapes. The plaster I'll be using is just regular plaster of Paris. There are plasters made specifically for this process which absorb water better and faster, but they're generally harder to get and more expensive. For this size of mold, plaster of Paris will work just fine. This device is a dental vibrator. While I'm mixing and pouring the plaster, I want to try to get rid of as many bubbles as I can. The vibration from it will persuade the air bubbles to rise to the top instead of sitting on the 3D print and creating bubbles on the clay cast. After pouring in vibration, I tap the mold a few times to make sure there aren't any air bubbles, and then leave it to dry. After it's set and hardened, I can demold it. Plaster likes to chip, and rounding the corners can help prevent chipping. I scrape them to round the corners, then set the mold aside to dry. It turns white and has a chalk-like appearance and feel when fully dry. The drier it is, the better it will suck the moisture out of the slip. Slip is basically just watered down clay. To make it, I put some clay in a cup of water and stir it. The clay becomes liquid and is then poured into the mold. The mold then starts sucking the water out of the clay and leaves the clay stuck to the side of the mold. The clay looks like it's sinking and you can see the moisture line growing larger. I had to refill the clay multiple times throughout the process in order to make sure the clay continued building up on the sides of the mold. Once I feel like enough clay is stuck to the sides and the dish will be thick enough, I pour out the extra slip and place the mold upside down so any extra slip will drip out instead of sitting on the bottom of the dish. After letting the clay sit for a little bit, it dries and hardens enough to scrape off the excess clay. Doing this now makes it easier than trying to remove it later. Once done, just let it sit and it will dry and shrink enough to pull itself off the mold walls. You can see the gap here from it shrinking, and it should be fully disconnected. It's really fragile at this stage, so I have to be careful and let it continue drying out. Once fully dry, I can sand or scrape the edges so they're not so sharp. This will help me get a more even coat of glaze on it. I fill it with a little bit of slip and smooth it out as best I can, then let it dry out again. Once dry, it can be bisque fired, and this is where it turns white and hard. Glaze will stick to the oven's firing tray and ruin it, or ruin the casserole dish itself, or both, so wax is applied to inhibit glaze from getting on at least one surface for firing. There's different ways of adding wax, but I find that taping off a line gives me a straighter line. Once taped off, just add wax to the bottom and you should be good. On something this small, dipping can leave drops of glaze that will be thicker than other areas, so I brush them out. Let it dry, and it's ready for firing the glaze. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment and let me know what meal you hated the most as a kid.